of growing. As I say, it's a joint event with ourselves, Food for Life get-togethers with Eden Projects. For those of you that aren't aware of Food for Life get-togethers, we are a charity that supports community connections through growing, cooking and sharing good food. Eden Projects are a key partner of our programme and bring their expertise and knowledge in developing and supporting communities and community connections. And that today is what this event is all about. It's about us celebrating how we can support and connect with our communities through growing and sharing. Today, we're delighted to have along with us a number of speakers, which I have no doubt that you will enjoy hearing from, and quite a variety of expertise and background that they're going to be sharing with us. It's today, the reason why the event is hosted today is because it's the first night of Plant and Share. And Plant and Share is a key campaign of the Get-togethers programme, and it is around how we can connect with our communities through planting, growing and sharing out. And really you can be as creative in how you want to do that, whether it's sharing your seedlings or sharing the produce that you grow. And what we're really hoping from today is that you'll be inspired to maybe come back together and at the big lunch and all share a meal together of what you've grown. Really, you know, I'm not going to talk an awful lot about this, but COVID has been a really difficult time in terms of loneliness and isolation in our community. It's also been an incredibly inspiring time to see how communities have been creative and inventive in reaching out to those hard to reach members of our community. And today we're just going to hear a few examples of those inspiring stories. As Yana said, when our speakers are talking, please do put any questions in the chat box with capitals of question in it, just so we can see those, and we will hopefully get time to follow up on those in the Q&A session that we'll do after the three speakers speak. And then we will lead into a practical how-to growing session with our wonderful Anne Mary, who is outside making me very jealous, who is going to be going through some great tips to get tips and tricks to get us started. So once again, thanks again for joining us, and I am going to now start with our first speaker, who is Isabel Lloyd. Isabel is, in her own words, a zombie gardener. I'm not 100% sure if you know what a zombie gardener is. I have to admit, I'm quite excited about hearing more about a zombie gardener, and she's very passionate about making us all zombie gardeners after tonight. So it'll be interesting to hear just what that means. She once was a former journalist and now spends her days growing vegetables, growing food and flowers, and in her words, weeds, but I presume she means wildflowers, or it could be weeds, in the hills in Sussex. She is a co-author of a book called Gardening for the Zombie Apocalypse, How to Grow Your Own Food When Civilization Collapses, or Even If It Doesn't. Seems like quite a fitting title to a book. So with little more, I am just going to hand you over to Isabel.
Okay. Hi everyone, lovely to sort of see you all here this evening. I'm going to share my screen with you, if you give me 2 seconds just to do the tech. I've got a little PowerPoint presentation to share with you, which I hope won't be too boring. If you can hear banging in the background, by the way, that's my cat who's trying to tell me that it's dinner time. So I don't know, maybe just put your mufflers on. Right, so I'm going to start with this, start the share. There we go. So I hope you can all see that. Maybe someone can wave at me if they can't. What I want to talk to you about tonight, very briefly, is how I believe that anyone can start to grow at least some of their own food, a little bit of their own food, in a process I call gardening for the zombie apocalypse. So first of all, Tracy was saying, what is that? Well, it's a silly name really, but describes a simple, but I think very important thing. It's basically fruit and vegetable gardening, but with the emphasis on growing what you can, where you can, and using the minimum of resources. So why should you have a go? Why could you have a go? So partly because it's fun, but also there's this. So if we were in a room for real now, I'd ask you to put your hands up and see how many of you have ever bought a bag of washed, probably imported salad leaves and then thrown it away before you ate it all. And I bet probably most of you will put your hands up. That's because 1/3 of all the food that we produce in the world never gets eaten. Some of it gets lost by farmers or gets spoiled in storage, but really, truly shocking, 11% of all the food that the world produces is thrown away by you and me, by the people who bought it before we ever put it in our mouths. And that consumer food wastage, as it's called, accounts for 9% of all the greenhouse gas emissions the world produces each year. So it would be really good if we stop doing that. How? How can we do that? I'm sure most of you are familiar with a lot of the different ways we can reduce the food emissions that we produce. One of the most obvious is to eat locally produced food. In other words, you're reducing your food miles and all the carbon emissions that go along with food miles. Another one is to eat vegetables instead of meat, or at least certainly to swap some of your meat for vegetables, not just because of reduced emissions, but also because it saves space. An acre of soil can provide almost 10 times as many calories if you grow potatoes in it than if you use it to feed a cow that's going to be eaten for beef, for instance. If you eat seasonally, in other words, you're not relying on artificial heat or light to extend the cropping period of the fruit and vegetables you eat, that will also help. But I also believe that the vital fourth part of that is to eat your own, grow your own. If you grow your own food and eat it, it's going to be as seasonal and as local as you can possibly get. And plus, if you've gone to all the trouble of sowing a seed, growing it on, watering it, feeding it, cropping it, say it's a lettuce, you're much less likely to throw it away at the end of it. And imagine if everyone in the country replaced just one bag of bought imported salad every year with one homegrown lettuce that they've grown themselves. That'd be 60 million less lettuces needing field space, needing plastic packaging, needing lorries to transport them all around the country. So that's why I believe it's a good idea that everybody does a bit of zombie gardening. Now we'll look at the how. Okay, so first of all, a lot of people will often think if you're going to grow vegetables and fruit in any kind of meaningful way, you need an allotment, and they're hard to come by. Allotments are, yes, they're great. They're traditionally around 250 square meters, which interestingly is enough to feed a family of four a year if they grow nothing but potatoes. But even the average British back garden, which these days is really truly small, 13 square meters in a new build, that's still enough to grow 16% of all of one person's calorific needs in a year. So the first thing I would say is if you've got a garden, any kind of garden, a front garden, a back garden, a tiny little patch, start growing some veg in it. And that doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to be utilitarian. There's this picture that you can see here. It's from a very well-known zombie gardening Instagrammer called Suburban Existence, who's filled the whole of his garden in Melbourne with raised vegetable beds that you can see here are really good looking, as well as absolutely packed with gorgeous green food. And it also doesn't mean that your kids lose out if you've got children, because a veg patch doubles as a play area and the most fantastic outdoor school. And one zombie gardener we know in Australia installed a little kids slide down from their decking straight into the rest of the garden, which they turned into a veg patch, and they say the children are now never out of it. That may be because of the slide, but I like to think it's actually the vegetables. Now, what if, though, you don't have a garden? And that obviously is the case for many of us these days. I understand that. But in fact, pretty much any outside space that gets adequate light can be used to grow food, and actually quite a lot of food. So if you think that the average London new build balcony flat, that's a one bed flat with a balcony, their balcony space will be about 1 metre by 2 metres. So 2 metres squared. That might not seem like very much, but it's actually enough space to grow 15 tomato plants. And if you do that well, that can produce a really quite heavy 52 kilograms of tomatoes in a year. You can see in this picture, this is from a Berlin balcony, an Instagrammer in Berlin. He's growing tomatoes in little window boxes on the back wall of his balcony, but he told me that they've also got kohlrabi going out there, carrots, cucumbers, strawberries, as well as several kinds of herbs. And that is because pretty much any kind of fruit or vegetable plant will actually do well in a container, provided you match the size of the container to the size of the plant. And also, this is critical, use the right cultivars. Now, some of you might not know what a cultivar is, so I'll explain. Cultivar is shorthand for cultivated variety of a plant. And there are loads of cultivars of veg plants that have been bred over the years to do well in containers where root space is quite confined. In fact, in our book, we suggest several container-friendly cultivars for each of the 20 plants that we show you how to grow. And that means as well that you don't just have to stick to veg plants if you're growing in containers. Fruit trees are also perfectly possible in tiny spaces in containers, and they'll give you a crop year after year after year with just feeding and watering, and as long as you change the top few inches of compost every year and refresh it, they will do well. As long as, again, you buy a young tree that has been grown on what is called a dwarfing rootstock. That will mean that the tree will always stay small, and that means it will always stay happy in a pot. So the apple tree you can see here rather beautifully growing in a dustbin is growing in what's known as a standard bush shape. But another space saving tip, if you've got a very small space, is to buy a young tree that is espalier or cordon trained, which means it has been trained to grow in a flat shape, so you can tuck it tight up against a wall or a fence and save even more space. I've seen them growing against a garage wall, between the little tiny gap between the garage wall and the driveway where the car goes. And you don't have to stick to fruit trees, you can try fruit bushes. So there's lots of great fruit growing on bushes, like blueberries and cranberries. And we grow an exotic thing called Sichuan pepper plant, which makes the peppers that you use in Chinese 5 spice. So you can be very creative. What if you have no outdoor space at all? So I'm very aware that many of us have no outside space of our own anymore. But there are ways around this. I've seen people growing courgettes in a pot by a front door on a doorstep. I've seen sweet corn grown very successfully in the strip of soil between a roadside curb and a city pavement. I've seen gardeners growing herbs in planters that they've attached to the walls of a communal bin store in their block of flats. But obviously, famously, people who've got no outside space get told, grow on a sunny windowsill. Well, I'm always a little bit dubious about that. And that's not always as easy as it sounds, because depending on the way the window faces, it may not get enough light. If it's north facing, or if it's south facing, the light might be too fierce. And in any case, the light will always be coming from one direction only, which means plants tend to get lopsided. They don't really want to grow that way. However, if you've got space for some cheap metal shelving, either by a window or even against a wall, you can now use fabulous low energy LED or fluorescent grow lights, which are not always expensive. And if you hang them from a cheap metal shelving, you can make your indoor growing much, much more successful, particularly if you stick to the kind of plants that like warmth all the time. And they're often the expensive ones to buy. So things like basil or chilies, baby leaf salad, microgreens are things you can grow year round. In fact, I've even known some people do bush variety, low growing variety tomatoes in those kind of settings. Now, you might worry, looking at that this is all going to cost a lot, but it really doesn't have to. Wherever you're gardening, indoors or out, it doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be boring. For instance, you don't need to spend a lot of money buying seed trays or module trays. Instead, if you raid your recycling bin, you can sow seed in plastic mushroom trays, the little things you get mushrooms in from the supermarket, old yogurt pots, old hummus or tara masalata pots, cardboard inner tubes can work quite well. You can even cut off the bottom ends of plastic bottles and use them, as long as you remember to add holes for drainage so you don't drown your seeds whenever you're watering them. And once your seeds have germinated, pretty much anything can be used to grow plants on, in, or up. We use old dustbins quite a lot, which work very well. And in this picture here, you can see bathtubs to bellies, who have made an entire vegetable garden out of old bathtubs that they get off skips. They've raised them up on blocks to help with the drainage, as you can see, and very successful. If you're looking for ideas like this, I can't recommend Instagram enough. It's great. It's a free resource. You'll see people doing all kinds of clever things with pallets, obviously, but just recently I've seen some fantastic things. One Instagrammer had made a polytunnel frame out of the metal rim of an old children's trampoline. I've seen squash trellises made from 3 linked ladders, crotches made from old children's hula hoops cut in half and covered in net curtains. And my current favourite is a mechanised compost sieve for sieving out your homemade compost, which is made from an old chest of drawers, mounted on skateboard wheels with a chicken wire base and driven by a battery-powered drill, which is frankly just genius. And also a great example of another key part of the zombie gardening mantra, which is to reduce your use of outside resources.
Isabel, if I can just jump in just very quickly, I'm sorry that our time is so tight this evening because we've got so many speakers, but if you're happy enough to round up, and hopefully we'll be able to maybe pick up on some of the bits that you haven't quite finished on in the question.
Well, okay, I'll keep it very quick then. The outside resources, if you're gardening in small spaces, don't bother buying in farmyard manure in bags. Use green manure instead, which are seeds that you grow the plant, chop it down, dig it in, and that improves your soil's fertility and its structure. Grow OP or open pollinated varieties of plants to save your own seed. And if you do that in a club with other people, you can each choose a variety to save. Each one of you saves one kind of veg seed each year. Collect your mains water, collect your roof water if you have a roof, and share it with neighbours. Oh gosh, okay, next one. And I did want to show you this because making the maximum use of your space, if you're in a small space or communal space, use that space in the maximal way you can. Use your vertical spaces as creatively as you can, and use your horizontal spaces creatively. Use interplanting, close planting, and then share your seeds, share your plants, share your gluts, share the joy, join the gang. It's you become part of a great big worldwide community if you're growing food. And I believe it's a very important community because it's only by doing that we learn to understand how our planet works and how better to look after it. I'm sorry to have overrun.
Oh, don't apologise. Just absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure everybody else probably would agree with me that I could have listened on to lots of your examples for a lot longer there. So sorry that I have rounded up a little bit quicker, but it's just so we get time for our other speakers to talk. And we'll come back to you, Isabel, in the Q&A. So I'm going to just quickly hand over to Kathryn now, and I'll not do the big bit that I had planned, Kathryn, to say, and I'll just maybe hand you over. But Kathryn has got a huge amount of experience in creatively looking and exploring how communities can be strengthened by bringing people together, in particular through growing. So I am just going to hand you over to Kathryn to say hello.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. And thank you, Isabel. That was fascinating. I learnt loads along the way. So I'm Kathryn, and I think I might be a zombie gardener. That's not something that I've come across before, and I absolutely love it. So that whole ethos of working with what you've got, using what you have, begging, borrowing, perhaps not quite stealing, but using what you've got to grow as much as you can is definitely right up my street. So following all those brilliant examples from Isabel, I thought I'd share with you one really particular example, which is a little garden that I've been looking after on our street pretty much since the start of lockdown. So just for almost exactly a year now. So in the flats that we live in, we have a tiny bit of shared garden, but very little. And it felt when we moved in that the opportunities for growing might not be very much, so we wouldn't be able to grow very much here. But what we do have is an area at the end of our block of flats, which is allocated by the council for keeping the wheelie bins in. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of these so that you can see exactly what we were starting with. So this is a before picture, which hopefully will appear on your screen any moment. There we go. So here you go. This is our garden, or this was our garden. This is how we began. And as you can see, it's a surprisingly generous amount of space for wheelie bins, but it's completely paved and has been unloved for a really long time.
Kathryn, I'm
yeah.
sorry, I can only see your file with the 3 pictures.
Oh,
We
no.
can't actually see the picture.
In that case, what I'm going to do is
You want to stop share and share again or something?
what I'll do is I'll pop it in the chat, and then people can access it from there, if that's all right with everybody.
Or you could try again, just in case people are on their phones.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, please don't interrupt. Don't apologise at all. How's that, Tracy? You see that?
Yeah, we can see that now. Thank you.
Oh, amazing. Perfect. Okay, so this is the garden that we started with. Paved, very unloved, but bigger than you'd expect to put the bins in. And this is owned collectively by the 8 flats where I live. So this is the space that's now become our community garden. And I'll show you, fingers crossed you'll be able to see okay. The after picture. Can you see this, Tracy? Can you shout me?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Amazing, yeah. Thank you. So this picture was taken last, not quite summer. So about 5 months after we started, I think. And as you can see, firstly, I weeded. That made a massive difference. But as you can see, we've made quite a lot of what is a really small space. So last year we had peas and beans growing vertically up the struts at the back that you can see, the pyramids. We had herbs, we had strawberries and blueberries, and raspberries is the closest picture at the front there. There's potatoes, there were tomatoes in the hanging baskets on the black hanger that you can see there. I did carrots. You can actually get really marble shaped carrots that I grew in an old drawer. And as you can see, the dresser on the left hand side there was donated by somebody who was getting rid of it for free, and has become the home for herbs. So there's chives on there, there's rosemary on there, there's thyme in there, and mint as well. So that's the garden broadly as it is at the moment, although it kind of changes week to week, if not day to day. And I kind of wanted to share, there's that. Firstly, I don't know very much about gardening at all. Almost all of you, I think, could teach me many things about what you plant and when you plant it and how you look after it and all of that sort of thing. But the reason I wanted to tell you about it is because I think it's a really nice example of what you can do with not very much in terms of space, not very much in terms of existing knowledge or expertise. People always say to me, oh, you must be a gardener. And it feels really fraudulent because I can plant some seeds. I can certainly put pots of things that people give me on other things that people give me. And between us, we've created this thing, and it's become a beautiful part of our street. A beautiful way of getting to know neighbours, especially through lockdown, of course, because we've all been much more local, much more of the time. And it's kind of become an excuse to start conversations with people. And I really noticed that people use it as a way to get into conversations. So sometimes it can feel quite hard to start conversations with our neighbours, or to go round and knock on the door and, you know, say, do you want to be my friend? It feels a bit strange. But that opportunity to lean on the gate, lean on the fence and ask, what are you growing? I've seen this has been different. I've seen you've been working on it. What's going on? Feels a much easier way into getting to know people. And I always think that the great thing about doing it a bit scrappily, you know, it's very much not perfect and it's very much not beautiful. It's obviously made with stuff that's been donated or recycled or upcycled or scavenged. And I always think that it makes it a little bit easier for people to find a way in. Doesn't look like I'm nailing it on my own. It looks like I need a bit of a hand, because I definitely do. So people have been incredibly generous. People have donated endless pots and hanging baskets and planters. A neighbour across the road gave us some of his homemade compost, which I think is like gold dust, because it's been cooking in his garden for a really long time. A neighbour made a cold frame for me. So people have been incredibly generous and have really gotten involved along the way. And a lot of people have taken lovely ownership over it. So a little girl who was 5 or 6 showed me around it the other day because she thinks it's her garden. And she's got her favourite plants and her favourite ornaments and that sort of thing. And it's really lovely to see other people starting to feel like it's their garden, at least as much as it's my or our garden. The other thing that's been really nice about the garden, as well as it's kind of bringing us together, and I think it started to change a bit how people feel about the street and about what's possible to do. I've heard people say, oh, I hadn't really thought about doing something like that, or are you allowed to do something like that? And we're very often held back, I think, by our perceptions of what's possible, or what an individual or a group of individuals can do. So I think it's been really nice in, I was going to say seeding, is that too much of a cliche? In seeding other ideas and starting with one thing and generating lots of other ideas. So as well as I think encouraging other people to start turning their spaces into whatever they can make of it. It's become in itself a little bit of a starting point for other community projects in our area. So it's now a collection point for our local litter picking group, who are absolutely epic. They're complete, the most productive wombles you've ever met. It's amazing. So now in our cold frame, we've got a little storage area where the litter pickers can come and collect the equipment that they need. We're hosting a big lunch there in July. And it's become also the foundation for a couple of little art projects. So just to close, I'll just show you finally one of the art projects that we did in the garden last year. So just bear with me whilst I grab you a photo real quick. So one of the early things that we did last year, photos come in, bear with me, was to partner up with a poet called Skylar Nerrigan. And she installed this poetry installation in the garden. So she's got poetry printed onto road signs, street signs. We chalked her words on the garden itself, on the wall of the garden, and we made rock poetry. So just wrote individual words and individual lines from her poems on rocks, and people played with them. People turned her words into their own words and into their own poems. And it was the most beautiful way of starting conversations with people, of starting conversations about poetry with people, which isn't a lot of people's everyday thing that you chat about. And it in itself has led to lots of further projects around, we're doing a nature trail around the town at the moment, and helping people to kind of bring together this idea of creativity and growing things and community. So I'm going to stop there because there's loads more brilliant people to hear from this evening. But as an example of taking what you've got and doing what you can and using it as an excuse to start conversation and to see where it leads to, I hope it might spark a few ideas for doing what you can with the space that you have to hand. Thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathryn. I have to admit, I've got tingles a little bit just seeing those pictures and the enthusiasm in your delivery, and just, you know, your commitment to how, you know, those thinking through those challenges of connecting with the community. It was just lovely to hear. So we're going to our final speaker tonight, before we go into our practical sessions afterwards, is from Patrick Hosey from Omagh in Northern Ireland. And he set up the Strathroy Community Gardens and Men's Shed. Patrick recently was awarded, the community group was recently awarded Food for Life get-togethers grant for Plant and Share, and we are going to hear about his project now. Patrick?
I don't mute myself.
There we go.
Oh, wait, it's just pictures. You can't see me, thank God. I'm reading from my hymn sheet here, a wee bit I printed out earlier, because anybody that knows me through this group, other groups, I can waffle on a wee bit. So I'm just going to give you a wee quick background on myself, and then, I removed from the spotlight there, and then I'll go on to the wee speech. My name is Patrick Hosey. I suffer from mental health issues, so I decided after trying lots of different things, I needed an alternative therapy. I took up gardening, mainly growing fruit and vegetables. It really has helped me. I have become a community gardener, and I was a builder, bricklayer, and with my building skills, I like to help others with all things gardening. I am in the process of starting a community garden and shed, and it's not men's shed, it's a shed for everybody to use, because a lot of the men's sheds just let men in the local area, which will deal with health and well-being, including other alternative therapies, e.g. growing, cooking, knitting, whatever your alternative therapy is. That's what we want to try and help people with. The pictures you see at the minute, and I'll talk about, is me having a few bad days, which is the one on the right, and I have them episodes over the last 10 or 15 years quite often, where I can go into myself for a couple of weeks, months, and not speak or communicate, but the gardening helps me get out. So where am I now? It helps me, right? So the other picture is me in a better day, and it's me doing a wee bit of planting out at a place called Mecca in Mullickmore, which is an established garden. And what it is, my friend Elizabeth McHugh, and I think Libby McHugh's here, I've seen her there earlier on. Libby and I was asked through the Strathroy Community Garden to do plants for the volunteer centre, Omagh Volunteer Centre, and they have a wee project called Bee Friend Hub, where they go out and call people every day to make sure they're okay. So we're asked to do 60 plants, and that's me planting up there. Just one for the photo. I have to admit, Libby done most of the planting, if not all, and I just helped supply the stuff and all. So I hope Libby doesn't mind me mentioning her name, because she has to take all the credit. She done all the hard work. I'm more of a talker and organizing things, and Libby will tell you she does a lot of the work. And we are only set up a subcommittee in the Strathroy group, but I've just got a call last Friday to say the man over the grounds and the green spaces in the House Executive is meeting me tomorrow at 10 o'clock in Strathroy to give us the go-ahead with the polytunnel, which I've been fighting for the last 6 years through different things. So let's go on to the next one photo. So that's more of the Befriend Hub project there. That's the stock we bought. We spent something like £1,200 on stock. And as I say, Libby, over a couple of days, she's magnificent, done up all the things. I only done one or two, and I helped deliver them and sort it out. So the next couple of photos then after that there would be, this is me on a better day out delivering pots and hope of spring. I go out and I go around a lot of people's gardens, and especially community gardens. I've volunteered for the TCV, which is the Conservation Volunteers, sorry. And I've helped out in Gortson Community Garden set up, on Craigan, which is out Oma, they're set up. Obviously, Men's Edge was one of my big projects, and I helped out in there. And they're flying now out of Mecca and Mullickmore, a big community garden. And there was a wee place called Ramona House. I'd done a wee bit of help in there, setting up programs and different things. And Ramona House is like an addiction unit and stuff for people with alcohol and stuff. So moving on, I think the last photo I can see is me baking bread. I have to admit, this is my brother Philip's bread, but I've tried it too. So the idea of the project in Strathroy, the health and wellbeing, will be to get people to plant from seed, and then move your seeds on, swap your seeds, swap your plants, move on to harvest time, swap at harvest. Then everybody sits down to a thing called the big lunch, which was talked about briefly at the start. So I could bring bread, someone else could bring a hot food, someone else could bring juice, and we just sit down and mix in the community and talk about things we can do with the community and all. And I have to get a wee shout in here to Garnia McCluskey, who's leading projects in Neve Scullion. And I've been to the community camp, and this has led me in my journey from 2016 to do all this. So the last wee speech is here. As I say, I do the volunteer work to help others by sharing my knowledge and skills, and I get donations and small grants. I got a grant from a crowd called Live Here, Love Here, and they've paid for the polytunnel, except for £200 donations I got otherwise. And as I say, we're hoping the House Executive is going to give us the go-ahead tomorrow to put up the polytunnel. I got a couple of small grants from the council, seeding grants, starting off grants, just small £200, but every penny counts. And I got, as I say, the grant from Live Here started, and there's another one being applied for this year. And the final grant I got was the, let me say this right, the Soil Association, I have it here wrote down in front of me. Food for Life project, which is this what we're talking about tonight, and the joy of sharing food. So share the joy of growing. So that's the event tonight. I want to say thank you to them for inviting me. Thank you to the Eden communities, and they've given me a small grant. It's £150. So I have to hold 6 events, and they started on the first Saturday of every month on the 3rd of April. So we done a seed swap. The next one will be a plant swap and showing people how to plant and move on plants and prick on, and all the things all the different speakers have talked about, I do as well. And all this helps my mental health, and hopefully it helps other people. And then this will run through to September, and hopefully by then, the big lunch actually happens around about the 4th or the 5th, or maybe the 5th and 6th of June, but you can hold your big lunch anyway. So at the end of it, we'll have a big lunch in Strathroy. Everybody's invited, anybody can come. You just bring stuff and bring your family, bring your friends, and then hopefully we'll be fit to use the community centre or marquee or something, and social distance and be safe. So that runs on to September. So I'll be showing people how to grow the seed, service, harvest, cook, and their bird juice. We will try to do some small cooking classes if we can in the local community centre if it opens up. If not, we'll do it by Zoom. And then I just want to thank everyone who has helped me on my journey, from the Eden Community Camp, Grania and Neve, and all the other great people in Eden, because it's great to meet people and you find out how to run community projects and different things. And as I say, thank you to the girls from Soil Association. And there's so many people I can't name everybody, because I know a few are here tonight. And as I say, it's all about my mental health and well-being. And I hope I've helped other people in the wee things I've done and will continue to do from now on. So hopefully I haven't chewed up my 10 minutes. We've caught up. Thank you again.
Absolutely, Patrick. Just thank you so much for being so honest and giving such a personable presentation of how gardening and growing and connecting with your community has helped your mental health, and inspirational stories of what you're now planning to help your community. So thank you, really, really enjoyed that. I'm going to pass back to Jana now, who has been tracking some of the questions that have been coming through in the chat box, but please do add up more as Jana's talking as well.
Great, thank you. And thanks again to all of our amazing speakers. So we've got some really interesting questions. Let's start with some of the garden fanatic questions. And one of the questions I think a lot of us have, and I'm sure all of you, and Kathryn, you count as a gardener there as well, will have something to say about natural pest control and how to go about that in your gardening project. So maybe do we want to start with Isabel? So how do you deal with the little pests and creepy crawlies?
The little pests and the big pests, because we're being a country site where we grow most of the time. We get everything from teeny tinies up to deer. Mostly barriers. I don't use so-called organic pest controls like neem oil or anything like that, because I think quite often they're simply chemicals that haven't actually been tested in any meaningful way, and you don't actually know what they may be doing harm to the environment that we don't know about yet. So I tend to just try and keep things off. I'm a huge fan of insect mesh, which is an investment, it has to be said, but it lasts forever. We've been using our big sheet for 12 years and it's as good now as it was the day we bought it, and it keeps off everything from carrot fly right up to rabbits. For the bigger things like cats and pigeons and the stuff that kind of flies in and lands and squash stuff, we tend to just use twigs. We put lots of twigs between our plants. So we use hedges for wind barriers, and we cut those each year, trim them lightly, and we use the brushwood, stick them in to seed rows of seeds or in amongst young plants at planting out time when they're most likely to get pecked at or squashed. And that keeps most things off. So twigs and insect mesh.
Great, thank you. Any other tips to add to that, Patrick or Kathryn?
Not really. I'm frantically scribbling notes from Isabel. I think she has said more than I possibly could.
Oh, great. All right, perfect. And then another quite specific gardening question around the idea of growing in shallow things like drain pipes. Would you need to water the crop more often when you're growing things in those kind of containers?
Now, here I can help.
Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've definitely reconsidered over the years. So it is really fun to grow in little quirky things, but some are more practical than others for sure. So things like the baths and sinks that Isabel showed pictures of, I think are awesome because they're nice and big and also hold the water really well. Whereas some of the, particularly like the little cheap, cute pots you could get, they're really sweet, but they dry out so fast. And particularly in the summer, I was watering every day just to try and keep stuff alive. Hanging baskets, again, I found pretty good, but lined. So I just use the bags off compost, which is a trick I learned from my mum. Just cut the bit out of the bag and stick it in the bottom to stop them draining quite so quickly. But I've definitely started to manage myself in terms of getting big enough stuff to try and give yourself a bit of a head start. So drawers I found pretty good. The dressing table that I showed you has drawers that pull out, and surprising how much you can grow in there, and they do tend to tend to hold the water reasonably well and also drip through from one to the other, so that as you water one thing, you're kind of watering the next tier down as well. So I personally would avoid the really tiny things, and try and buy yourself a bit of an easier life with slightly bigger things.
Great, thank you. And just to say that we will be sharing our speakers' kind of social media accounts and stuff. Some of these we're already sharing now in the chat, but just to say that we also will include all their contact details, how to connect with them on social media, in the follow-up email as well. So one question specifically for you, Patrick. So very inspiring what you shared with us. And one of the questions there was, how do you get back from the dark times and what keeps you going?
Well, the dark times is for anybody who suffered depression or any mental healthness, is really hard to pull yourself out. It just getting the courage and getting up one day and saying, right, and I say that to a lot of the old men and men's sheds, when I say old men, 70s, 80s, and that, if you can just get out of bed and do anything, even if it's just to get out and talk to people, have a cup of tea, is part of the men's shed thing. As for the growing, it's my therapy. It's not everybody's therapy, but it's most people here tonight. And, you know, it's really hard to describe, you know, the dark side thing. Like some people get in darker and deeper. And since I put up, I have a Facebook page, and I think Tracy's going to share some, and it's just Oh My Garden of Friends. And then I have the other one just for Strathroy. And people actually private message me about depression and all, but I have a lot of quotes and like, and I've even had friends ringing me up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Are you okay? Are you okay? And I says, yeah, I'm okay. I'm just sharing on stuff, but I don't always be okay. So getting out of the dark sides. And Grania McCluskey put a wee thing up there. It's great to hear an Irishman speaking, because the statistic is from men from 18 to 35 and now 35 on to 50 and 60. Men don't talk to partners, wives, whatever it is, families. They just try and bull on and be brave. But I don't see the fun in that. I like to talk and express. And if that helps just one person, it's well worth talking about it.
Great, thank you so much. And yes, I completely agree. One of my family members is suffering from depression, and I do know some of that, the difficulty for people to draw themselves out of the hole. And I think you and others really give great examples of how and which role gardening and outdoor activity can play in supporting some of that. So thank you for that. Tracy, just quickly checking, have I missed any important big questions which I have not asked our lovely speakers quite yet? She's on mute.
Yeah, just someone wanted to know whether the bins were still in there, Kathryn, because they couldn't see them. I have bins still in that space.
Thanks for caring about my wheelie bins. So they are now just over the fence. They're just the other side. I got some free paving slabs off of Gumtree. They're a little bit rickety, but they mean that the bins are no longer in that space, but that all of my neighbours can still get to them, because we all get pretty protective over access to our bins. And just around there as well, I'm also experimenting with, I call it the wildflower meadow. It's about 1 metre square. And it looks like at the moment, like just a patch of weeds. But I've got some mint in there, and I've got some wildflower seeds in there. So last summer it ended up beautifully. So I'm trying to sort of balance. So we've got the bins, but we've also got the wildflower meadow.
Great, thank you everyone. So I think that kind of brings us quite on time towards the end of our Q&A, which is great. So maybe just to say we have a little teeny tiny comfort break now. So that really is like just 4 or 5 minutes. If you want to grab a cuppa, or you need to pop out for a few minutes quickly, then please take that time now and come back at 6:55 for our live growing demonstration with our lovely Anne-Mary. And just quick question, do people, if they want to get going with the growing examples, do they need to bring anything?
No, they can just watch me do it, hopefully do it right, and take some tips from that to do later.
Perfect, great, thank you. So great, then we see you all hopefully back in just about 5 minutes time for our next part of our session. Come back everyone. So Thanks for sticking with us and being here for our second part of this event, which will be more focused on what support is out there to help you get going on growing your own with your community, as well as a little life growing exercise shown by Anne later as well. So, but before we do that, I would just love to hand over to Anne Ward from Food for Life get-togethers in Northern Ireland, and to tell us a little bit, as Patrick mentioned, there is quite a bit of support available for people to get involved with growing food with your community, also food ready to be eaten at the Big Lunch this June, our annual get-together for neighbours and celebrating community. So over to you, Anne.
Well, thanks, Yana. And such a lovely evening, and I'm sure you're as inspired as I am after hearing from the lovely Isabel, Kathryn and Patrick. So really, I'm going to just focus now on some resources and tools that can help you to make this a reality for yourself. So first, I'd like to just talk a little bit about, oh, not moving. There we go. So yes, today is the first day of our Plant and Share campaign, and it's a wonderful opportunity to cultivate that amazing community spirit that we have seen growing over the last and very difficult year. So it's like a continuation of that, and what we want to say really is, like all of the speakers, it's a beautiful way to connect, a beautiful way to share and to watch something grow, which is just pure joy. So we have a lovely Plant and Share toolkit, and we'll be sending the link to you. Somebody might be putting it in the chat box now, but we have any amount of resources, from posters, little colouring competitions, resources on recipes, and also, you know, resources on how to grow things in wellies, strawberry wellies, pea shoots, herbs. You know, we have lots of resources which guide you as well to you know, consider things like climate and nature friendly growing as well. So they are all in a beautiful link that can be downloaded, and all the resources are really easy to use. So they're all free. And one of them is really this lovely, simple 3-stage process of literally picking a crop that you want to grow, picking a pot, and you can see there it can be anything from an egg box to containers that you might have bought flowers in, anything at all, as was mentioned earlier, and then picking a spot wherever is convenient for you, whether it's on a windowsill, out at your back door, anywhere at all that you can find a spot to grow it and to just nurture. So these are some of our other resources as well. So we have lots of other free online resources. I mentioned the recipes, the growing tips. We would love you to join our social media. We have national pages for each of the regions, but we also have you know, a national Facebook page as well. We'd love you to join that lovely good food community. Beautiful for sharing everything from funding to recipes, growing, all of that. And we would love you, if you are going to take part in a Plant and Share project, we would love you to register the event and become part of this emerging and growing, excuse the pun, community. And then you can also keep up to date with any future opportunities in the programme, and to receive our newsletter, which is always filled with inspirational stories of projects that we've helped to grow. We have a small grant. Our final one of the year is, the closing date is the 30th of April. It's £150 and can be used to support you to buy seeds, compost, equipment, anything that will enable you to come together with your community, whether remotely or socially distanced, to help connect through food, from growing, sowing, growing, cooking and eating together. And we also provide practical support on, you know, anything from project development to connections with other groups that you've been trying to connect with. So myself and Kathryn, who you've already met, are here to support you, as well as all the other regional teams in Scotland, England, and Wales. And if you want to be connected with somebody in a particular region, just let us know. Other campaigns that we have, our lovely partners, the Eden Project, here with us tonight. So we hope that you're maybe starting to grow something for the big lunch to connect and have a celebration, whatever that may be this year with the restrictions. And then we have World Food Day in the autumn. And we provide matchmaking, you know, to connect you with maybe local schools, care homes, or other community partners who, if you're maybe thinking of starting a community orchard, we can connect you with people already doing that. And we have a lovely community connector site and inspirational stories on our website, which you can have a look at as well. And this is our Food for Life Get-Togethers Facebook page. As I said, we'll share this with you. And this is just our Northern Ireland Twitter handle. We have one in each of the regions. So that's me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Anne. There we go. Great, so, and as we said, there's loads of support available, so just let us know. There will be a follow-up email coming your way with all this information as well as the different regional teams you can approach if you now fancy to start growing with your community. And in case you do feel like growing with your community, but you do not quite yet know how to go about it, so I would love to introduce you now to Anne-Mary, who is the regional coordinator for the Food for Life Get-Togethers in Northern England. She's a mom of 3, and after a spell of ill health and being housebound, she explored community gardening for herself and went on a little mission of sharing what she learned with all of her neighbors and all of her friends and everyone she could talk to. And I think she is quite excited to join us from her lovely home garden and tell us a bit more about how to start get growing your own. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Jana. Very kind words there. I am an obsessive, self-confessed obsessive grower, and I try and get everybody I know and don't know growing as well. And yeah, I do have a chronic medical condition, and that's not always great. And when I had my kids, it was really, really rubbish. And I was stuck inside, and I could see this piece of land being changed into what looked like a garden. And then it stopped, and it was so irritating that the work on it had stopped, and I wanted to know why and what it was and who was doing it. And went and saw the children's centre, and they said, we wanted a garden. We've got a garden, but now we don't know what to do with it. So I went, aha, that's the bit I can do. And that's what got me back out in the community. Having always been a community worker, it got me back with my confidence and teaching people to grow. I am not, I'd say I'm not an expert. I'm an expert in my own growing, but I haven't got any horticultural qualifications. But that does not mean that I do not know how to grow, or that I am not a gardener, or that I can't inspire other people to do it too. And it also means there's loads that I can also learn from other people. So tonight, I want to show you a bit about what I grow at home. And how I do that. You might have noticed behind me, I can't see so well now because of the way the screen is, that I have got random things. So I grow in random things. So I've got a wellie with some spring onions in, although they're looking a bit worse for wear today. It's been a bit warm here in West Yorkshire, which is a surprise. I've got a mop bucket that's got some of my broad beans in at the moment. And here, this beautiful tree here is in an old dolly tub, which I think looks absolutely mint. But to grow inside with my kids on the windowsill, it can be quite tricky because pots get knocked over and they're all different sizes. So what I tend to use is the old punnet from, say, mushrooms or tomatoes or whatever you can get in the supermarket. And I quite often get people to save these for me. My dad's a really good hoarder for saving things in his recycling for me that I can then grow in. And the best thing that I discovered about these is you can make mini greenhouses out of them. So you could use one as the bottom and one as the top to keep things warm overnight. Because I don't know about you where you are in the country. In West Yorkshire, it's pretty nippy on a night at the moment, and it will be until at least the end of May. So sometimes things need a little bit of cover. And one of the things that would be really great for people to grow as part of Plant and Share Month, because they could then harvest it for the big lunch, would be something like pea shoots. So pea shoots are really tasty as part of a salad. I find my kids like to eat them. We do grow peas, we do let them grow, some grow bigger to create the pea pods, but we also love to plant pea seeds. What they find is interesting is, because I'm a tight Yorkshire woman, I tend to, when I'm doing pea shoots, just buy a packet of dried peas from the supermarket. So just the ones that you'd get where the lentils are or the rice is, there's normally packets of dried peas. And all I do is I'll soak them overnight in water. So you can see there's some there, they've been soaked overnight, so they go a bit plumper. And then I'll put some soil into my container, and then I'll just sprinkle them in, and I'll be quite liberal. I'll put quite a few in, because what I'm wanting is the shoots, and I'm going to show you some that I made earlier in a minute so that you get to see what I mean. So there's quite a lot in there. If I tip it, they're all going to move, so don't mind them moving. I'll sort it later. And then all I do then is sprinkle some soil on top. Usually it's sort of the size of the seed and a little bit more to cover it with. And that's as simple as it is. I don't know about you, but sometimes seed packets really confuse me. Sometimes it's a drawing, sometimes it's a measurement, sometimes it's written, and I'm not quite sure what a centimetre looks like, or whatever the depth is. So I try and think of what the size of the seed is, and that again, so twice that amount. And then in a couple of weeks, let me just pop this on the floor. In a couple of weeks, you could have something like this. This is really exciting. So I planted these on Easter Sunday. So that's the size that they are now. And 2 weeks prior to that, I planted these ones. Oh, look at them. So we're already eating off these ones. And they've got the little labels there, which again were made by just cutting up a margarine tub with these ones. And they're brilliant because they're waterproof labels, and you can use them again and again. And the kids can have their own pots, so they each usually put their name on as well, so they know whose is whose, and they can have a little race. But recently I've discovered, so you know how I showed you that you could put like a lid on top like that? Recently I discovered that at one particular supermarket, if you buy grapes, they have a pot that's like this. It's already a greenhouse without you having to do any sticking or worrying that the lid's going to fall off. So in this, I thought tonight what I'm going to set off again for the big lunch is some salad leaves, some cut and come again salad leaves. So in this pot, and I don't know if you'll be able to see very well, there's loads of different tiny seeds there of different kinds of lettuce, sort of salad leaves. Some will be peppery because I like a peppery mix. And all I do with them is, so you saw with the peas, they went in a bit deeper. So I will just sprinkle these across. Now, again, sometimes my fine motor skills are rubbish sometimes. The kids are dead good at doing this for me, usually, with little seeds. So I've sprinkled some in. You may or may not be able to see that very well, and I apologise because they are very, very small seeds. Sometimes when I'm using very small seeds, I'll mix them with some sand or some fine compost, first of all, to sprinkle them more evenly. I never understood how that worked. I don't still fully understand how that worked. But I do know that it does work to get them more even. And because they were such tiny, tiny seeds, I only want to cover them lightly, because otherwise it'll take an age and an eternity for them to germinate or not. They'll decide. I must say as well that I tend to work with damp compost already, because I found that if I plant seeds, especially small seeds, and then drown them with water afterwards to make it damp, they all rush to the sides of the pot. And then you get nothing in the middle and loads of things struggling together at the edges. So if this compost is damp already, they're already touching that wet compost, and that should be enough to get them started and germinated. So all I'm going to do with this now is close that little lid. It's got air holes in, it's got drainage holes already, it's already built in. I didn't have to do very much at all. And that'll pop on my windowsill, and we'll see what happens, see when they germinate. there's lots of things that you could do that would be quick for the big lunch. There's radish, which are a lovely peppery crop that quite often confuse you if you only get radish from the supermarket, because they're not as peppery. And then when you grow your own, you've got a different depth of flavour and also lots of different colours. But something I learned doing the community garden, and I can't show you right now because it's the wrong time of year, is that the pod of the radish actually is the best bit to eat. So I've grown radish all my life. It's a thing that kids always get to do, grow a radish. And they grow and then it gets hot and the radish decides to make its flowers. And at that point, the radish root is rubbish. You don't want to eat it. It's gone all woody and horrible. But what I didn't know is once they've made the flowers, they make little green pods and they are the tastiest bit. So it's not a harsh peppery flavour. It is a lovely peppery flavour and it's juicy and it's perfect in curries. It's a perfect curry vegetable. And it was some lovely ladies who came to the community garden and supported me who taught me how to use radish in that way. So I will grow a row of radishes in the spring and I will harvest them from early summer all the way through to autumn just for their pods. So from 10 radishes, I could just like keep feeding my family delicious curries with these pods. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to know what those salad leaves may look like in a few weeks' time, this is some rocket leaves that I'd done that we've started picking from. And they're really, really tasty. We just snip out bits to add into our salads or into your sandwich or whatever. Yana, you must tell me if I am running out of time because I can't see my clock, but I wanted to also tell you about some other recycling things I use. So I've told you about the labels. We've got big ones. We've got small ones.
You've got plenty of time, Anne.
Oh, super. Thanks,
and
Kathryn.
I've got lots more to learn still, so keep talking.
Oh, no, I'm keeping talking. Don't worry. You know me, I can talk all night for you. But one thing I love to do, and this is also a really good thing to keep the kids occupied when they come and help me in the garden, and I really need them to stop digging, is to create pots out of toilet rolls. So just your standard toilet roll, you can do it with a kitchen roll, it doesn't matter. I think most of us acquire these in our lifetime, and they're brilliant to use. Now I do half and half, depending on what I'm growing. I might just leave it like that. I might just not close the bottom, but it's dead easy to close the bottom. If you see on here, I've snipped it in 4 places, and all you do is fold over those ends on themselves, and that creates a lovely pot in which you can then plant, and it's not got all the soil falling out. I really love toilet rolls for growing peas and beans in because they've got a really long root structure. They like to put their root really far down and they don't like it being disturbed. So I'll set off my peas and beans usually in these, but the open version. But I've also found that I can use them for other crops. So here are some beetroot and they'll be planted into the soil very soon. And I plant 4 or 5 seeds of beetroot together because as they grow, they'll push apart from each other naturally and still make lovely beetroot. And it saves you having to create lots of separate holes for just one vegetable. You'll see if you read about gardening, if you look in gardening books, it usually says sort of multi-sown modules. Modules are usually in something like this, and so a pot like that is a module pot, but you can do everything like that in toilet rolls as well, I found. And if you need something smaller, you can cut them in half and use them small. To be honest, I tend to just use them the size that they are. I think that's because I'm a little bit lazy, and that just works for me. Another crop I wanted to talk to you about was potatoes. Now, although that's not a quick crop by any means, it takes a couple of months. It is something that's dead easy to grow at home. It's something that is really enjoyable to then discover the treasures that you've grown. I have experimented with so many different ways of growing them in terms of what pots to use, and I don't think I've got a favourite. At the moment, because I've passed loads of pots on, I'm using what actually are called potato bags. I'll show you. It's not a bag made of a potato, it is a bag for potatoes. These were given to me free, of course. I'm not going to go out and buy them, but that's just me. I have used, with success, I've used rubble sacks, but old builders rubble sacks. I've used the compost bags that the compost comes in. And I've used, one of the good ones that the kids used to love was the buckets that flowers are in at the supermarket, which quite often are sold off like 10 for £1, and they're a good size to put a potato in and get a nice harvest. So in this bag already, I've got some compost. I'm not going to tip it to show you because that will end up in disaster. And I've got some potatoes to go in. So these have been chitted, so you can see they are already sprouting and starting to create some leaves here. And then that just means that when they go in the soil, they're already sort of on the move. I got quite often, I don't know about you, there might be a potato that's going wild in my veg rack, and I'll use that one to plant. These are actually seed potatoes. It's unheard of for me to get seed potatoes, but they were end of season, 50p a bag. I was like, oh, go on then. Let's try this variety. So this is what I'm using. But like I say, you can use what you've got in your own veg rack as well. Similar to when I do the peas, I don't worry so much about some veg, whether it's a marketed seed packet or something that I could actually get to germinate. So I do chickpeas as well. They're quite interesting, and I do that with a dried pack of chickpeas. But when I'm growing my actual peas to eat the pod, eat the peas in the pod, I might actually buy a named packet because I want a certain variety that's either going to be cope with West Yorkshire weather, or that can also have a longer pod. It's quite nice. Some have a much longer pod, or sometimes I am actually looking for just more of a Monge 2 type of thing. But when I'm doing the dried peas, like from the supermarket, that's usually just for the cutting of the pea shoots, which is really nice. One last thing that I wanted to mention to you was that, and I'm just trying to see where I've put it, you can easily make more plants from plants. So, and this was a last minute thing that I did at the weekend, although I have seen there are some tiny roots starting. Well, I sort of did on Friday. From your herbs, if you've already got herbs, say for example rosemary, in here I've got rosemary and lavender, you can take cuttings. So if you can see on this one, I've just taken the young shoot off the top of the plant and I've stripped it of its leaves here, and then I just put it in my little vase with water, and after a while they start creating roots, and I'm always successful in this method when I do it in spring. That's the only time I can get it to work, and I can make lots of new plants to either plant around my garden, because I'm obsessed with having herbs everywhere, because the pollinators love herbs, they love the flowers quite often are edible as well, an extra thing to make something look delicious, and it's really simple. When I was a uni student, the uni had a fantastic rosemary bush, and I used to just take 1 or 2 little new shoots, not loads, I'd save some for somebody else. But it might be that in your local area there's somewhere that has something like a rosemary bush or a sage bush or a thyme bush that you could just take a little cutting from. You don't need many to then start your own at home, and then you've got one there to take cuttings from in the future. So I'll stop there if that's okay, to see if there's any questions at all.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Anna, go ahead.
You go.
go.
Great, thank you, Anne. Thank you so much. I followed that very closely because I have collated all my milk bottles and my toilet rolls and everything to get going on my t-shirts. We had one question, I believe, which was around any top tips about growing sweet potato. Is that something you do on a regular basis?
No, I've only grown sweet potato once in the past, and I didn't get a very good crop, so I just guessed it was because of where I am in the country. You know, it's amazing for lots of things is Yorkshire, but maybe sweet potatoes aren't its thing. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't really help with tips for sweet potato.
No worries. I'm sure there are some tips people can find online as well. Great. So thank you so much for that. That was really, really, really useful. And yeah, and I'm just going to, well, you can see the co-hosting here. So I will be just handing back over to Kathryn.
Hi, thanks. I have a quick question for you, Anne. If you unmute yourself there, it was just about the cuttings. So whenever you take a cutting and you put it in your water and you start to get the roots, how long then would you wait until, you know, would you end up having a plant that season this summer if we took spring cuttings now?
Yeah, you definitely would. So I wait until it gets okay. So I just admit that I'm busy. I've got my fingers in many pies, and sometimes I'll suddenly go, oh, what are all those white straggly worms in that vase? And it's not at all, it's loads of roots, and I've forgotten about the poor things. So I have left things quite long sometimes when they've sent the roots out. I do like to have a substantial amount of root on the cutting before I plant it, because I've found I have more success that way than getting too excited when I see the first root and going, oh, let me pot it on now. I've come to quite a few disasters that way. But if you've got a good root system going on, then get it in some soil.
Great, thank you. Thanks. I will. I am going to go round to my auntie's, who's got a wonderful herb garden, and take some cuttings this weekend. So, well, really, that is the end of tonight's session. It's just been so wonderful both to have so many people join us, and then just to hear such a variety of stories and kind of inspiration from our speakers, and just how passionate. I know that everybody will have sensed it, just that positive feeling that has come around growing food and sharing with their community. And I hope that from today's session that you will go away from today and think to yourself, well, do you know what? I don't need a big space. I don't need a lot of money. I can just get started, and hopefully I can use it as a way to connect and share what I'm growing with people in your community. And I would just like to say on behalf of myself and Eden Projects, thank you very much. We're going to follow up today's evening with an email with some of the links that we've been talking about. But just before I go, I would like to very briefly, and I am putting poor Romy on the spot, but I would just like to let you all know that we've had a wonderful girl today that has been creating visual minutes from tonight's session, and I am completely putting her on the spot, but I just wondered if, Romy, you would like to share a little bit about what you've created from tonight.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Romy, and I'm in Belfast, and I've been, for the very first time ever, trying to create some visual minutes. So thank you for all your lovely talks, which were very inspiring. And this is what I've been drawing.
Wow.
One. Hang on, I need to go that way, don't I? So there's another one. There's not as much colour in that.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I hope that is in some way legible.
That's amazing. Well, hopefully we'll look forward to maybe seeing those, and Romy, if you were happy enough, then we might share those out in our follow-up email or at some stage, because that's just such a lovely way to bring together what has been talked about tonight. And sometimes we don't get visual minutes very often, and tell you what, if I had more visual minutes, I might read them a bit more and work. I shouldn't admit that. But thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that, Romy. That was lovely. Just before we go, we have shared a couple of times in the chat box the evaluation for tonight. It's very short only. There's six questions, I think, and 6 or 7 questions. It'll only take you maximum 2-3 minutes, but it really does help us, especially in this collaborative event that we've done with Eden Projects tonight, just to hear your feedback, and to tell us what you enjoyed and what you and if you've got any ideas of other things you'd like to hear from us or ways we could have improved the session, please do share that. So I'll just pass back to Anna and Tracy if you want to say goodbye, and thank you for again to all the wonderful speakers from Kathryn, and Isabel and Anne.
Great, thank you. Yes, just a big thank you for everyone who took the time to join us, and we would love to hear from you if any of you would like to share some of the lovely things you may grow after joining this session. So please let us know, and we will be sharing presentations and content and resources, follow-up resources as well in the email. So yeah, so I think that's it from us, and yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully see you all soon.